Welcome everybody to another Beyond Terrain mini lecture. Today we have a really fascinating topic. Supplements, confusing topic. Depends a lot on categorization and concept formation, so should be an interesting video. If you like what we do here, give us a like, comment, share what we do, subscribing, also to follow along. And if you want to learn more pragmatic, personal ideas surrounding the terrain, you can join the Beyond Terrain community. We are currently in a wait list. So make sure you join because founding members lock in a low price, and they also get a free consult call so that I can get to know you, your goals, your values, and you can help shape the community, what it looks like. So make sure you go and do that. There's only 100 spots available for that, and you can find all that information on the website. Lots of great blog posts on there, so make sure you go check those out too. Pumping out a lot of really good content there. So I would highly recommend go checking out the community, the blog post, Instagram, all that good stuff. Beautiful day here today. You could tell I have this fluffy little thing on my neck. It's not terrain approved. It is made out of plastic, which sucks. I couldn't find any cotton ones. Guess I didn't look all that hard, but this will have to do for now. So hopefully the sound quality is a little bit better than what it was in the last few videos. All right, now for the video, supplements. Really important topic. A lot of supplement shills out there. Which supplements are good, which supplements are bad? What are supplements even? How do we define them? I think these are all important questions to ask. Obviously not all supplements are bad, but it depends on how we categorize them. It depends on what we're considering to be a supplement. So we're going to cover a few of these things in the video today. It can be kind of difficult to draw the line in what a supplement is and what is just a real whole food, what is synthetic, etc. So we'll cover all of these in the video today. We in this world are absolutely obsessed with magic bullets. We're obsessed with quick fixes. Now, of course, there's a time and a place for supplements. There's a time and a place for pharmaceutical intervention. I'm not going to deny any of that. I'm just saying generally, you don't need to take Advil once a day. I actually heard of this professor once. My buddy was telling me, University of Toronto, he was talking about how his professor takes Advil every single day as a preventative measure so he doesn't have inflammation. Right off the bat, you think, well, since you won't have inflammation, that's good. But with all due respect, I think this is pretty narrow-minded. If you have inflammation, there's a reason for that. And just getting rid of the inflammation is not getting rid of the reason you have inflammation. Similarly, many of us now are obsessed with supplements. We move from pharmaceuticals to supplements, which is just another form of magic bullets. And largely the supplement industry is just a greenwashed pharmaceutical industry. Most of it's synthetic, or at least it's processed in an extremely synthetic manner, examples which we'll cover today. So it's kind of hard to find and decide what a good supplement would be if we were to ever need a supplement in our life to be whole or to add to our life. All right, that gets into our definition of supplement, not nutritional supplements, but the actual word supplement, which is a thing added to something else in order to complete it or enhance it. So I think we can work off this definition. I think that makes sense. Often we use supplements in this day and age to enhance. Sometimes we use supplements to complete. A lot of us are deficient. You could say that we're nutritionally deficient. Does this mean we're deficient in vitamins? Not necessarily. Go check out the Reuters pod. We're going to be talking about that more in these mini lectures moving forward as well. But it does mean that we are nutritionally deficient in some capacity, and we think that taking an isolate or something of that nature will complete us, will complete our physical intake of nutrients. So we'll explore that in a little bit as well, but I think this is a really reasonable definition for supplement. Some of us take supplements to enhance our lives. You might take a pine pollen or a bee pollen, which may or may not be adequately categorized as a supplement. They might fall under the category of whole foods better, maybe not pine pollen, who knows. Again, this is all a little bit subjective, and after getting roasted by Cowan in our podcast episode together about definitions, I think that's kind of a funny thing to think about. So we're going to categorize supplements into 3 categories: the good, the not so good, and the ugly. So obviously the good, I think we can kind of start this discussion off here. Seems like the easiest topic to cover. In this category, it's just whole foods. For some reason, we think that whole foods in their natural states, we think of them as supplements. Personally, I would categorize something like pine pollen as a whole food. Things like bee pollen, honey, royal jelly even, I wouldn't necessarily view these as supplements. I view them as whole foods. Like, I wouldn't consider eating raw beef liver or raw bone marrow a supplement. Now, I guess that's my personal definition. When we look at the definition of supplement, these can be used to complete or enhance the diet, the physical diet. So that's why they are in this video. That's why they are under the category of the good. So examples, I mentioned a few. I would add even a sea moss, unprocessed. I don't know if you would actually eat sea moss in nature, but something like an oyster, I wouldn't consider a supplement, just a whole food. And I'm talking about these foods in their raw state. Can we put cooked foods in this category? I think this is kind of personal opinion, a little bit. Something even like a tea would technically be minimally processed. I think for sake of clarity, let's keep it as the good, unprocessed foods in their natural states as would be consumed by native man, primitive man, or an animal. I'm not insinuating necessarily that cooked foods are overly harmful, but I am saying that cooking is a process. So that's the reality of the situation here. Unprocessed foods just in their absolute most natural state, not doing, adding, mixing, anything like that, a purity, right? And we're not talking about the pure isolation of magnesium. We are talking about the purity of a whole food, the purity of an oyster. You can isolate that. You can isolate an oyster. You can isolate honey or bee pollen. And, maybe you can argue that those are processed, and that's probably a good point. Maybe the real whole food in this category, rather than bee pollen, honey, royal jelly, or honeycomb, would actually just be sticking your hand in a wild honeybee's nest and taking it out and consuming it, even with the bee larva, even with dried up bees, whatever. So I think that's kind of an interesting point. So for sake of consistency, we might have to place the bee pollen, honey, royal jelly, all that stuff in the next category. But I think this is where you can kind of make up your own mind and really understand as well the point of this conversation, that these aren't necessarily supplements. It's what we really should be consuming as human beings. So let's get into the second category, the not so bad. This includes light, minimal processing, natural forms of processing. Where do we draw the line here? Again, it becomes sort of complex, but I think, again, we can simplify this a lot just by saying, what was done by, a primitive individual. So things like cooking, with fire especially, minimally processed, however still processed. Is this going to be harmful? I would say if you're living, in a natural accordance with the human existence, these aren't necessarily going to be harmful. Should you still consume raw foods? Absolutely. I think that every primitive tribe around the world consume raw foods, and even fermented foods for that matter, and cooked foods, right? You tend to see cooked foods in this category as well. So again, a balance is important, but I think that's an important point, right? So what is in this category? We're talking about natural ferments. We're talking about cooking. I would probably add into this category freeze drying, like think of a desiccated organ supplement. I add this reluctantly into this category because you can't, you're not using traditional methods per se to create this. So again, it's kind of one of these difficult things to categorize. Should we place it in the latter category of the bad? Freeze drying, you're dehydrating, you're freezing it, often in some sort of vacuum state a little bit. Do we disregard it as being the not so bad? I do think it falls under this category. I think if you are taking desiccated organs, I don't think that that's going to be a big problem for you if you're living again, trying to live as much in natural accordance with human existence. So I do reluctantly place it in this category. I've taken them myself. My wife has taken them. You know, I've not noticed any side effects per se. And again, it depends on your situation. If you're not going to consume raw foods, if that's not something that you're going to do, like consuming raw liver or raw other organ meats, taking the desiccated format is your next best option, which is why, again, I placed it in this category as well. And I do think realistically, the nutritional capacity is going to be similar to cooked food, which is why I placed it in this category. I think there is some evidence to say that it does retain structure and nutritional value, so that's why it's in this category. Okay, so let's talk about a quick example and why this is kind of a difficult conversation to have. If we think of something like cod liver oil, which category would this be placed in our little the good, the not so bad, and the ugly conversation? Which category would you place it in? I'm kind of eager to know your guys' thoughts on where you would place these certain foods, but I think this becomes complex because it's the methods of extraction and processing that matter here, right? So I think that's one of the biggest questions that you can ask if you are going to take something as a supplement or consider it a supplement. I think that's a good question to ask. How was it processed? How was this created, right? You look at Weston A. Price, you read his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, you're gonna have a kid and you think, wow, I gotta take cod liver oil. And you go to the store, you go to the supplement store, you buy this little amber bottle of cod liver oil and you start taking it every single day. You're gonna wanna explore that brand. You're gonna wanna explore how it's created because it's not all created equally. Traditionally, as Weston A. Price would have discussed it, I'm fairly sure, and I'm not so certain on this, I don't know if there's evidence for this in his work, but if he observed traditional peoples and primitive individuals using cod liver oil, it would have been done through traditional fermentation. It would have been done in wooden barrels. And through this natural fermentation process, without necessarily a bunch of ingredients being added, the oil would naturally rise and it would be skimmed off, and that's what would be consumed as the cod liver oil. This would have a horrid taste, I'm sure, fermented fish liver, although raw, fresh fish liver is quite enjoyable, in my opinion. But you know, within this method, there's no heating involved, there are no additives, we're not adding any sort of other ingredients, we're not adding any sort of chemicals, etc. So I think that's category number one, natural fermentation. And you know, this could also be kind of on that gray area between the good and the not so bad, right? Where, you know, it seems like an extremely natural way of going about consuming food. And I think just a little point here that can be considered as microbial content. You know, something that contains the naturally occurring microbes could probably fall closer into the good field. So a naturally fermented piece of food, like even a high liver, or like I'm mentioning here, traditionally fermented cod liver and consuming the oil. You know, I think that's kind of an interesting point, that it still contains these naturally occurring microbes, probably even higher content, which might be better medicinally or as a supplement, right? It's being altered in a natural format to increase its vitality, to increase the life, to increase its pre-digestibility and then its digestibility, right? Because your gut doesn't have to work so hard. So the second method of creating cod liver oil would be like a steam extraction, or, you know, heating it up, right? So heating it up, this could be boiled as well, and this would eventually separate the oil from the liver, and then you would be able to obviously harvest the oil. Now, in this process, we're heating it up, it's minimally processed. I would place this in the not so bad group, although as a supplement, I would worry about oxidation. Lipid oxidation is something I've been looking into a lot more. There's a lot of literature on microbes bioremediating oxidized liver, or lipids, sorry, like the fatty molecules. But I think that's something to consider. Would I take a boiled fermented fish oil, or a boiled oil at all for that matter? Never. I would only have something that would be cold extracted, like in the traditional method. personally. I think that's kind of an important point. Now again, it's up to your own discretion what's going to be best for you, what's going to be the best option for you to maximize nutrients and vitality, and to maximize your own life. That's why this is exactly why I created the Beyond Train community, because I could come on here and spew theoretical knowledge and philosophy all day and night, but sometimes it can be difficult to translate this into your real life. So make sure you go join the waitlist, because this is what we're going to be discussing, your own personal experiences. Should I do this? Should I do that? Obviously, it's not advice in any sort of capacity for legal reasons, but the reality is that we can help work through some of the things to realize what's best for you in a group format with a bunch of like-minded individuals. So within this second form of processing, I think it's important to note that there can be other methods that are added to this, like a deodorizing or refining effect, trying to create a more pure compound. There might be degradation of nutrients. And if you are a vitamin person, there might even be a degradation of vitamins, like vitamin D, for example. Okay, there are also other methods of refining a fish oil, a cod liver oil especially. You can use solvents. You can use something like a hexane to remove the oil from this. Higher shelf stability, it becomes easier to do, it becomes lower in cost, which are all things that food companies do to increase their profit margins. So when we're talking about pharmaceutical companies creating supplements, which when you go to the superstore, you go to the Sobeys, and you see these supplements all there in the natural health foods section, these are all pharmaceutical companies creating this. This is not buying off of Bear Lando or Phoenix Aurelius, where they're in the lab using alchemical techniques to create supplements and foods. This is a whole different category, right? These are made in, a huge lab, right? Huge laboratories to mass produce this stuff so that it's sold around the world to maximize profits, right? So again, you got to look at source. Obviously, when hexanes are added, they say that they remove them. It's similar to the seed oil process. You add hexanes, dissolve the oil, and then you can harvest the oil. You boil off the hexane, and they say, oh, look, you're just left with the oil. Obviously, there's a contamination issue. There's a whole issue with oxidation, degradation of nutrients, changing the whole essence of the food, right? You're changing the essence of, you started with cod liver and you're ending up with this highly refined oil that doesn't smell like anything, doesn't taste like anything. What are you actually dealing with here? It's an ultra isolated compound, ultra processed. You're moving so far away from what is good and true and natural. And so obviously this category would fall under the ugly for sure. It would definitely fall under the latter category. Sometimes they actually add nutrients back to this. They might add a synthetic vitamin E, K, D back to the oil. Again, where are these additives coming from? Totally lab made, synthesized. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. There's also something called molecular distillation. I was looking into this a little bit, that they can use to refine oils, fish oils as well. And they say that it removes PCBs, it removes mercury, it creates a highly refined and purified oil. Of course, here you would have to add back nutrients. These methods are used to create supplements, high profit margins, very, very far away from what food actually is. This is commercial processing. If you're lucky and it's commercially processed, it's method number 2 through heat. It might use hexanes, it might use, so this is why brand research is really important and transparency is important. You're not going to find a lot of these answers for these huge commercial brands either. So obviously the latter 2, 3, and 4 are totally under the ugly. 2 could be reluctantly placed in the not so bad category. And the first traditionally fermented cod liver oil could also reluctantly be placed in the good category. But again, a little bit of gray area here, and that's why it depends on you, what you find to be most effective, what works for you, what benefits you the most, what's easiest to do in your life. Health is so personal, man. This might be a long video, so hope you guys are enjoying it. Give us a like and a comment. Let me know your thoughts so far. especially on the fish oil section. There's a lot of overlap with other oil processing. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. If you guys have any more info on commercial brands and the methods they use, would love to hear about that too. So what about powders like collagen, protein powder, you know, your greens? I would probably never take a green supplement. If you're gonna eat plants, you should eat wild foraged plants. Maybe even minimally processed plants are better. Like cooking them or having them in a tea. I think that could fall under this category. I'm not anti-plant guy, but in the natural order, we don't eat high amounts of plants, we eat animals. But I think this is kind of interesting. Some sort of collagen supplement. Are you taking a collagen powder in its hydrolyzed form? Are you taking bone broth? Are you taking gelatin, which might be like refined bone broth? You know, are you making the bone broth at home, right? So if you're gonna make bone broth, category 2, not so bad, you know? Some of the ag folks claim that, you know, the heavy metals are in the joints and the tendons, and when you boil it, it just releases it, so you're just consuming a bunch of heavy metals. It's not an absurd point. I know a lot of people drink bone broth, they do quite all right. Obviously used in a lot of traditional recipes, so again, if you want to go full primal, ag mode, forget about it, you know, don't eat bone broth. But I think we could place this probably in category 2. And what about something like collagen peptides, like a collagen powder, right? So hydrolyzed collagen, right? Is this in a natural form? Well, again, there's questions you need to ask yourself if you're going to take a collagen powder. What is the source of the collagen powder? You know, was it organic, grass-fed? Was it injected with cupcakes? Was it injected with vitamins and stuff like that? Because that happens too, right? Did it receive antibiotics? There's lots of questions you need to ask yourself. And a lot of these questions go totally unanswered and cannot be answered because when you're producing this stuff at such a scale, it can be very difficult, right? Now, if I was going to take collagen, I really like Carnivore Aurelius's collagen. He tests his for heavy metals, so I think that would be something that I would consider if I was going to take collagen. Should you take marine collagen? I don't know anything about marine collagen, but I know that I'd want my collagen from an animal, and I try to get my collagen from animals. And if you're looking for a supplement, heavy metal testing would be very important. Now, sometimes, I think all times when you're talking about collagen peptides, I think they use acids and bases to strip away the rest and really isolate these peptides out. So that's something that you should look into too. What's the process of them preparing this collagen? Are they using, you know, chemicals that you wouldn't ingest in your body otherwise? Or is there going to be contamination? If you guys are interested in these specific supplements, you know, this is exactly what we're talking about again in our community, right? So we go into the specifics of things if you're considering taking collagen. So I think the last thing that I would kind of throw into this not so bad category would be tinctures, medicines, stuff like that could be made in a lab, like an alchemical lab. I love alchemy. I think it's very interesting. I don't necessarily take too many tinctures. Can they reduce symptoms in times of need? Perhaps they can maybe make us more comfortable. Could they help the detoxification process go along? Perhaps. I'm not denying any of these things, but it's very individual. It depends on your goals. It depends on your life philosophy. It depends on what you want to do. Some people like taking a tincture when they're sick. Some people like taking Advil. You know, it kind of just depends on who you are. Some people like fasting. Some people like all sorts of things, right? So it's important to kind of ask yourself a lot of these questions that we're talking about today. What do you want to do for yourself and your family? What do you think is going to be best, right? The method of extraction, again, is important. Are they using carbon dioxide to extract? Are they using alcohol? Are they using distillation? How are they creating these tinctures? Things that could fall under this category are like essential oils, things of that nature. Again, like medicines, like alcoholic derived, I don't know, St. John's wort or something like that. Is it going to be harmful? Is it going to be beneficial? It depends on your situation. It depends the symptoms that you're dealing with. It depends how bad you want to feel better right now. It depends how long you can bear these symptoms for. It depends, are these symptoms going to overwhelm you and take your life away? Are they going to cause debilitating pain? It totally depends on your situation, right? So these are, like, if anything you could take away from this video is that if you're going to take something, just do research. First of all, look into it. How is it made? How did it come to be? Is it natural? How is it going to serve you? How could it potentially harm you? What's it going to do for you? How is it going to benefit you? How could it hurt you? So that's kind of the main takeaway here. I got a good guard dog right here. Good guard dog. Just standing guard. He loves the terrain talks, if you can't tell. I think we could probably conclude this second category of the not so bad. It's kind of difficult, you know, like I'm spitting some stuff out of my arse here, and it might resonate with you, it might not. I'd love to hear why you disagree with some of these points down in the comments too, or why you agree with them. You know, so we're just talking about categorization. As Cowan puts it, you know, it's all just made up. We're just talking here, and we're trying to speak logically and semantically correct. And so, correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So, in this category, the ugly, what we're really talking about here is synthetics. Again, it's kind of hard to draw the line on what's synthetic. Is collagen peptides synthetic because they were derived in a lab and synthetically created? You could probably argue that, yeah, it's totally synthetic. You know, you're not even on the cusp of using natural methods of extraction and fermentation and heating and stuff like that, right? So you could probably very easily argue that it could fit into the ugly. Again, are there times where things that we're going to talk about that fit into this ugly category are beneficial for some individuals? Depends on the state of their health, depends on the state of their body, it depends on who they are, it depends on what they want out of life. But I definitely include in this category synthetic versions of vitamins, even isolated minerals. No one consumes isolated magnesium in nature. You're going to be putting a Band-Aid on a solution. If you have low magnesium in your body, taking a magnesium supplement isn't necessarily going to fix the overall problem. So that's something you got to think about too, right? Am I just masking symptoms, or am I addressing the root cause of something? Do you need magnesium in your garden, maybe, if you're eating food like at home? Do you need to eat more foods that contain magnesium, maybe? Or are the sources that you're sourcing your food from deficient in magnesium, like the soil? You know, so there are other ways to go about it than necessarily taking an isolate. Again, go check out the Daniel Roitos pod, the first one we did together on taking isolates versus taking the whole. There is some sort of magic that we cannot replicate. You know, it's the parts versus the whole. It's the complexity of the whole being, rather than isolates. Nature doesn't understand isolates. It doesn't understand isolated nutrients. It doesn't understand, the body doesn't understand what this means. It can take it up, it can, you know, biochemically do stuff if you believe in that shit, you know, but at the end of the day, what's going to happen is your body might mask symptoms, they might get worse, they might throw the whole body off of its balance, of its natural balance, because you're getting isolated nutrients without other nutrients. And so the body doesn't know what to do with it. It's foreign. So these do get placed in this last category. Vitamins, you know, are a whole other beast. We're going to be diving more into vitamins in future videos. I won't do them justice in this video. The Daniel Roitos pod, again, the first one, does it more justice, but I want to dive into it further, understand it a little bit better. But they totally are, know that they get placed in this category. They are totally synthetically made. Even extraction processes like vitamin C, for example, the first thing you add is like lead acetate. So, you know, it's totally synthetic. It's totally synthetic, and adding very harmful chemicals. Orange juice as a vitamin C supplement, or taking some sort of flower, I'm blanking on an herb that's high in vitamin C. Stinging nettle, taking a nettle tea. Again, better, a lot better, on the cusp of natural, right? So the other thing with natural, in quotation, supplements is that nowadays we use a lot of genetically modified organisms, which is a whole other topic that we could discuss that I'm going to write down here in a moment. But the reality of the situation is they're using these microbes that have been altered in some capacity to create either the reagents and the components of the synthetic process, or they're creating these natural, in quotation, compounds through these genetically modified organisms in a laboratory, right? So something like citric acid, you know, they're using GMO microbes to create citric acid, harvesting extremely high quantities. It's like drinking a Holstein cow's milk, but on steroids, you know, like a way more intense version of that. And what I mean by that is the Holsteins have been selectively bred to produce as much milk as they possibly can. Selective breeding versus genetic modification, another fascinating topic that we could discuss. I don't like the idea of taking isolates. I really don't. I'm going to mention this one more time. There's an intelligence in the whole. And you can isolate whole foods, but then you question, what is an isolated nutrient? Does it mimic what's actually in the whole food? How can you control that? How can you test that? How can you know that empirically? How can you validate that? Realistically and, you know, strictly empirically, you can't. You absolutely cannot do that. So how do you know what you're even consuming? Just because it reduces a symptom doesn't mean that it's addressing the root cause. That's a really important point. It's like when you give, like Royta's mentioned, people with beriberi being fed a vitamin B deficient diet and being cured of beriberi. You know, it doesn't make any sense why you can feed a deficient diet to someone who's supposedly deficient in that nutrient and they get healthier, right? So symptom reduction isn't necessarily healing. I think there's a lot that can be considered here with isolates. You know, we could bioaccumulate these in the body. With isolation processes, there's always cross-contamination. We could talk about dependency issues. You know, can you become dependent on isolates? Can it create long-term imbalances as well? You know, I think that's another important thing to consider. And you can think about this strictly biochemically as well, right? But at the end of the day, the body recognizes synergy. It's really important that we understand that the body recognizes nature. It doesn't recognize unnatural things. You know, now, do unnatural things have a role in our lives nowadays, in these modern lives? They do, because if you're going to die of sepsis, and taking an antibiotic is going to save your life. But sepsis is not a natural phenomenon, you know, so we've created these problems, and so we create the solutions, seemingly, but the solution is always to get back to nature. Hippocrates said something like, for extreme diseases, extreme methods of cure are necessary or suitable, or something of that matter. I do agree with this. You know, modern diseases require modern solutions, but the best solution is always getting back to nature. Maybe temporarily modern solutions are necessary for symptom reduction, but at the end of the day, we gotta get back to nature. So let me know what your thoughts are on this video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And join the Beyond Terrain community so we can discuss these things more in depth. This is exactly what I want to do with my deep dives. I want to deep dive into very specific things, whether it be amino acids, vitamins, specific ones, right? We can look at the actual laboratory biochemical sheets, the basic chemistry of it, whether or not we agree with the basic chemistry, things like this. So make sure you go join the wait list. They're going to move really quickly, and you get a free 30-minute consult call. So go and secure one of those spots. You also lock in at that price. You get to really shape the community, what's going to be all about. The only constant in nature is change, so the community is going to be constantly evolving, growing, changing with the people that are in it, right? And it's all going to be based in a terrain foundation as well. True logic, alchemical teachings, ancestral teachings, true science. You know, this is what it's all about. We're going to dive deep into a lot of these topics. So spots are going to go quick. Go lock in that low price. Join the waitlist. Top of the comments, description down below. And thanks for listening, guys. Take care.